Let's get started with the DiG next to the SDE. I've got them both set for the same delay time, no feedback, no modulation. The entire signal chain is in the video description, and this is my core clean sound. What I'm going to do is start out with one of them, but I won't tell you which one it is. This is partially just because I want you to try and listen out for any perceived differences, and also because trying to film a rack unit which is sitting on a desk and then a pedal which is sitting on top of the rack unit is super annoying. So you're just going to have to put up with my guitar faces while I play, and I will flip-flop between each unit. Pretty darn close to get started there. I basically was not looking down at my feet very much there, and in the room I've got my monitors up quite loud at the moment. There is like the tiniest difference that I can hear because I know which one is which, but if I just kind of zone out from there, then I think just listening to it in a kind of musical context, the differences are so minute. So I think they've got that right just about there. What we'll do next is I'm going to engage the feedback on each unit, and I've got the feedback about halfway up on each of them. I have no idea if this is going to give me the same amount of repeats, but listen out for the decay on each unit. We'll start with one of them. Okay, so this particular unit, you can hear the repeats aren't getting quite as gritty as they fade out. It is getting a little bit darker than the other unit. Let's have a listen to the other unit again. There's almost like a little bit of crunch happening right there as opposed to this. Kind of interesting. What I want to do next is to kick in some modulation. So I've got I'm going to put the DiG on the deepest mode because I think that's where it sounds the closest to the Roland, although I won't tell you which one is which just yet. For reference, the Roland has the depth at about 5 and the rate control, it should be at about 10 o'clock. It's at about 9 o'clock now. I'm going to put it at 10 o'clock. That's where I found I matched it the best before. So you will probably hear more of a difference here. For me, the difference in each of these is the modulation, the fact that the Roland has 2 knobs, one for rate and depth versus just light and deep for the DiG really kicks in here. But again, see if you can guess which one is which. That's kind of cool. I like both of those sounds a lot. The modulation is just slightly deeper and wobblier on one, which again is just probably down to me not quite adjusting the controls properly. Let's hear them with some distortion now. Okay, you can probably discern slightly more of a difference right there. Let me just play you some chords with the feedback totally taken out of this. So unit number 1. But again, if we take the repeats up and kick the feedback line in here, we get this. This particular unit here is just a tiny little bit ruder than the other one with the distorted sounds. I don't hear it that much on the clean sounds if you just want to do like an edge style thing or you just want rhythmic delay. I think with distorted sounds, I would actually dial them in slightly differently, but I can hear more of a difference there. Again, that might just be that because I know which unit is which. One thing I want to do is I'm going to press the ×2 factor on the Roland, and then I will do a similar thing with the DiG. I'm just basically going to tap in the delay time, but I won't do that on camera. Alrighty, let's go with unit number 1. So one is slightly brighter with the repeats. I should say as well, if I wanted to compensate for that on the SDE, I wouldn't be able to do that. Whereas with the DiG, I can hold down these 2 foot switches on here and use the mix control to adjust the tone of the repeats. I haven't done that. I've just set it at the stock settings. So keep in mind, the DiG is going to let you get a lot darker or a lot brighter if you want it for that kind of thing, than the stock settings would otherwise do. And that's a really nice little feature on there. It's like if you want to exactly match both units up, you could use the Roland as your reference and then use that tone control as like the final little bit of polish on the top there, which is kind of cool. And you know what? I like both of them. The rack is kind of big and cumbersome, but it has a bunch of character in there. I'm going to play you the SDE. It was a slightly brighter one in there, which you may have guessed. And if we hear that against the DiG is just slightly darker, but I think most of the character is there. And it does have a slightly different character to its repeats. I was just talking about that tone control. What I'm going to do with this is I will just brighten it up the slightest amount. Let's have a listen to that. But maybe there is something in that analog circuitry surrounding the delay line in the SDE. It's by no means perfect, but that's part of the point. It's got all that character baked in there. Of course, the DiG is really, really tiny, and if I wanted to add in a second delay, well, it's as easy as just setting the time ratio and bringing up the mix on the second delay repeat in there, which would give us a gorgeous dual delay, even though I'm in mono. That's what I'm talking about there. So having that second delay on there, I mean, you would have to go and get another SDE to get that dual delay thing happening in parallel. And then you'd have to set the times and, you know, too much work. 2 knobs on the Strymon takes care of that. I'm not playing in stereo, like I said earlier. So if you are playing in stereo and you want to get that super wide kind of Andy Timmons halo dual delay thing going on, the DiG does that so very well. I basically only ever use it on the 12-bit mode, but there are 2 other modes. There's the ADM and there is the really high fidelity 24/96 mode on there. You can go and check out my demo of the DiG there. But yeah, the 12-bit mode for me, it cops that SDE vibe. Basically within, you know, 1% error, or not even error. It's almost like it would be interesting to have 2 SDEs side by side and see if they sound exactly the same, and then see if the DiG is within that tolerance. Let's swap over to the Rose now. All right, let's start with the Roland again. This is where I've got it, 375 milliseconds of delay, same mod and feedback setting. Pretty sweet. I'm going to move over to the Rose. I've got the feedback at around noon. The filter control is down, the depth and the rate are down, and I've got So that's kind of interesting. They're closer than I initially thought. I actually haven't tested the rows next to this. I just kind of started out with the DiG and I saw it sitting on my bench and I was like, hey, let's get this thing into the video. So the Eventide, what I like about it is it does these sounds. It does these kind of vanilla sounds really, really well, but you have a filter control on there, which gives you a huge amount of control over the delays. Like if I take it to say 1 o'clock, it almost starts to sound like an analog delay, and then I can crank up some sine wave modulation on it at the same settings as a roll. That's super sweet. I'll bring the filter down so it sounds a little bit closer to the SDE. It's pretty cool. It's kind of got its own thing going on. It does use a different modulation method in there. They're actually messing with the sample rate, which, as I understand it, is a little bit closer to the way the old Lexicon PCM 42 delay used to work. Another classic rack delay that I would love to try out. But then again, I could be wrong about that, and maybe that's just something I read on the internet. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. What I love about the rows, though, is, let's go back to a clean sound, is, you know, like the ×2 function on the SDE, and it has that kind of lo-fi 1.5 delay time knob on the back that's hidden there, is I normally hook this up with a MIDI controller when I do this, so I don't have to use my hands, but there is a time rate change that you can set to like ×2, ×3, ×4, or ×5. So that is going to bring the delay time down by that ratio. I think I've got it set to ×2 at the moment. It can do all that kind of stuff. So if you like sound on sound things, I would bring the feedback right up. I'll bring the depth up even higher so it gets more wobbly, and I'll just bring that filter in a little bit. And what I like to do is actually activate the reverse. So there's a reverse button on there. So this is also a reverse delay, which is awesome. And the like half/×2 function in there. So this is what we get. You can do some really fun soundscape stuff, this sort of thing. Which is a totally different thing. I can get lost with this pedal so much easier than using the Roland or using the Strymon. That's no diss on either of them. They're both fantastic at what they do, but the Rose kind of sounds the same, but the functionality takes it in a different direction. It makes me want to do weird stuff. It makes me want to spend hours just sitting here layering sounds and playing around with the knobs and almost using it like an instrument in itself, which I think is really, really cool with a piece of gear. You know, when a piece of gear can actually inspire you to want to go out and do different things, it kind of makes it earn its keep. I think the DiG, if you don't want to go out and use a rack unit, like if you're using a pedal board, like a kind of normal person, a reasonable person who has a few pedals on their board and they go out and they gig with that and they're not carting around, like an 18 space rack or something like that. I'm sure back in the day people didn't even do that. That was just for pros who didn't have to move their own gear. It's like when everyone started having to move their own gear, they downsized and they either went to small racks or modelers or pedal boards, and it's totally understandable. But the DiG cops that SDE vibe so very well. Maybe it's not quite as flexible, maybe it's not quite as crusty and crunchy, but you can slap that on your pedal board. It's super easy to use. It sounds fantastic. It's one of my favorite delay pedals ever if I just want, like a straight up rhythmic delay, or I want a beautiful lead delay. If I'm playing songs and I just need the delay to kind of give me a little bit extra, then I would go with the DiG right there. If I wanted to just go to outer space and have the ability to basically, like I said, almost have another instrument at my feet, then that's why I have the Rose. It can do the vanilla delay stuff, but it's for me, it's for those sound on sound things and the time stretch and the time warp and the really out there kind of stuff. It is mono as opposed to stereo like the DiG. I think that's a real great strength of the DiG. You don't have to have two Rolands. You can do it all with the DiG. But again, it's not quite as fantastic for the kind of whacked out ambient, like Eno, Lenoir style soundscape things. If you're a synth player, I'm pretty sure Eventide do a Eurorack version of the Rose, or maybe the Rose is actually a pedal version of the Eurorack thing, but it's a really inspiring delay. That, out of all these three units, if you had any of them, you would be super stoked. So let me know what you thought of these, and if you own any of these fantastic and phenomenal sounding delays, let me know what you like about them in the comments. Let's spread some love for these rack delays or rack sounding delays. I think they're pretty awesome. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.